SpongeBob is a show that has been known to push the boundaries of reality in almost every episode. I mean, talking marine life aside, there are constantly fires underwater, and a crab is the father of a whale. That said, one of the show's greatest mysteries has always been the concept of Sandy Cheeks, a spacesuit-wearing squirrel who, for some reason, lives in a glass dome at the bottom of the sea. But what if I told you Sandy's got some secrets in Bikini Bottom that might just make you question everything you thought you knew about her character in the show? You see, according to one admittedly strong theory, Sandy may have not only invented Karen, but has also been spying on her friends, or maybe it would be better to call them her test subjects. There's actually a lot of evidence to back this theory up, but I'll get into that in a moment. First, let's talk a bit about the theory and why some fans would think that Sandy might have malicious or scientific intent. For starters, Sandy is a squirrel, a land animal, living at the bottom of the ocean for some reason. Now, throughout the series, fans have gotten some insight into why she was there or what her role on the surface world was, but not enough to actually fill out her character, which is why fans are left to speculate Sandy's actual purpose in Bikini Bottom. Now, historically, we know that animals in research projects haven't made a generally positive combination, with many animals being the test subjects of research and/or cruelty as a result. It stands to reason that Sandy's situation could be eerily similar. Only, according to this theory, she's the one doing research on her subjects, the residents of Bikini Bottom in this case. Her job, obviously, would have become easier after she befriended SpongeBob and his group of misfits, but before that, she would have needed all sorts of tools at her disposal. According to the theory, one of these tools included Karen as well as other robots that may have made appearances throughout the show. In fact, there's a chance that Sandy created the entire chum bucket as a means to spy on the other fish in Bikini Bottom for her research. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. For now, let's talk about her employers. Do you remember how Sandy ended up in her tree dome in the first place? According to the show, Sandy was only able to live in Bikini Bottom because she received funding from a group of chimpanzee beneficiaries who seemed interested in her strange inventions. Now, if Sandy were just a scientist, this wouldn't seem too odd. This is what scientists have done throughout history, after all. They invent or discover something that allows them to gain funding to pursue their real scientific passions. So to learn that Sandy had a group interested in her inventions that would pay her enough to fund her own research isn't too strange. The strange part is that her personal research happened to take place underwater, when she, as a squirrel, isn't necessarily known for surviving in the water. Flying squirrels? Yes. Swimming ones? Not so much. Not to mention the fact that Sandy's benefactors outright said they're unsure about the economic benefit of having Sandy living there in the first place, which implies they're more interested in the research than simply funding it. This happened in the Season 4 episode Chimps Ahoy. In this episode, we see Sandy freaking out that her bosses were going to be paying her a visit to ensure that her inventions were still worth funding. This would understandably cause Sandy to panic because, without her funding, she wouldn't be able to continue doing what this theory suggests was her real reason for being in the ocean, studying the life that lived there, much like how NASA would study potential life on other planets. Whether this was a personal study for Sandy or one that involved the company that funded her is entirely up to you. That's the beauty of fan theories after all. Lucky for Sandy, by the end of the episode, Chimps Ahoy, she had impressed her bosses with her inventions and managed to secure a 20-year contract and pay raise to stay in Bikini Bottom. Okay, so now that we understand Sandy's employment status and the show's reasoning for how she was able to make a home for herself in Bikini Bottom, let's get back to the theory and Sandy's potential hand in creating Karen, the computer wife. According to this theory, Sandy was employed by Tree Dome Enterprises, an organization on the surface interested in studying life under the sea and the possible economic benefits of living or working there. However, once she was sent down to live in the dome, Sandy would have needed a way to integrate herself into the environment around her. Now, it's likely that she wouldn't have expected any of the fish or other sea creatures to warm up to her, considering how different she was. According to the theory, this is where Karen comes into play. The theory suggests that Sandy created Karen as an underwater robot that could get close to the residents of Bikini Bottom without alarming them too much, take in data, and report it back to her. Now, Sandy was a smart squirrel. She would have known that approaching the fish with Karen the computer might have just been as risky as she doing it herself. This is why Sandy would have created a reason for the fish to come to Karen instead of the other way around. In this case, it's likely that Sandy knew about the Krusty Krab at this point, as well as its rival, the Chum Bucket. Since all the fish that Sandy saw were coming and going from the Krusty Krab, it would make sense that she would expect the Chum Bucket to have been bustling as well. This is why the theory suggests that she planted Karen in a way that Plankton would meet her and incorporate her into his restaurant. Though I doubt Sandy knew that Plankton would fall in love with Karen, but that's a story for another video. The theory continues by suggesting that Sandy planned on using Karen to spy on the fish that frequented the Chum Bucket. However, as you know, Plankton's restaurant was never really popular, and therefore it became a failed experiment. In the end, Plankton got to keep Karen without knowing what she was truly created for. Now, you're probably asking yourself, didn't Plankton invent Karen? While that would track with Plankton's inventive attitude, when you think about it, he never designed anything that looked like Karen, unlike Sandy, who has done so on multiple occasions. You see, whenever Plankton was creating a robot on the show, it always was in the likeness of either himself or another resident of Bikini Bottom. He once even made a robotic version of Mr. Krabs to try and steal the Krabby Patty's secret formula. But not once in the entirety of the show has he made a robot that also had the computing power of Karen, or even resembled her a little bit. Everything he made had a face on it, or a body to it, neither of which are characteristics that could describe Karen, his computer wife. And when you really think about it, most of Plankton's robotic inventions seem to fail in some way, with most exploding by the end of the episode they were featured in. Sandy, on the other hand, has been known for her ability to create robots like Karen on multiple occasions, all of which were successful to the point where they became dangerous to those around them. For instance, in the episode House Sittin' for Sandy, SpongeBob and Patrick wake up Sandy's robot army that proceeds to attack Bikini Bottom. Now, while these robots don't look exactly like Karen, they certainly share more of a resemblance than Plankton's robots did. Sandy even had a screen like Karen's on one of her robots that was featured in the Chimps Ahoy episode that I mentioned earlier. So it's not too crazy to consider that Sandy was the one who invented Karen in the first place, simply leaving Karen with Plankton as a way to continue her research and spy on the residents of Bikini Bottom. You want to know what makes this theory even more plausible though? The fact that Sandy and Karen were shown to be pretty familiar with each other on multiple occasions. I mean, the two were even part of the same group of gal pals in one episode. The episode was called Girls' Night Out, and was featured in the show's 11th season. It centered around the idea that Sandy wanted to blow off steam with her gal pals around town. What's really cool is that the episode showed Sandy had done this before with her friends who turned out to be Mrs. Puff and Karen. In this episode, the group added Pearl to the mix, and by the time the night was over, they all seemed to be having a great time. But more importantly, this episode proved that there was at least a small connection between Sandy and Karen, considering they were both part of the original gal pal group. And this meant that they had hung out before. In fact, this wasn't even the first time Sandy and Karen worked together on screen. 2 seasons before that, in the episode titled Salsa in Basilicus, Karen and Sandy had to work together to save the city from Plankton. That's right, in the episode where Plankton made everyone in the town as dumb as Patrick, it would have been a great plan if the villain hadn't made himself dumb as well. The only 2 characters in town that weren't affected by the Salsa in Basilicus were Sandy and Karen, which meant that the two had to collaborate to turn everyone back to normal. Karen and Sandy worked really well together, despite most of their plans not working out. In the end, the two decided to start a university to reteach all the citizens how to be smart again. This worked out for everyone besides Plankton, who became the school bully. It was a hilarious episode that reinforces the idea that Sandy and Karen had some connection, which, according to this theory, suggests that Sandy created Karen and was using her for her own research. Now, do you think that Sandy would really be in Bikini Bottom for a malicious reason, or was she just a curious squirrel who wanted to explore previously uncharted territory? Be sure to let me know in the comments below.